Hispanics become less democratic the longer they've been in the country. Consumer confidence is down for the fourth week in a row, and that could have implications for the presidential election. I'm Frank Newport, Gallup editor-in-chief, and this is Election Matters. Hello, everyone. Susan Page, who's usually with us, is on assignment. She's interviewing a well-known political figure, and you'll see her interview in USA Today within the next week or two. So we're very lucky to have with us by phone today Gallup senior editor Lydia Saad, who has been with the Gallup poll since 1992. And we'll talk about some of the recent work that she's done and analysis we've done about Hispanics and also about consumer confidence. Lydia, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Frank.
We're talking about this special poll of Hispanics that we did. What we did is we asked some additional questions of Hispanics in our tracking poll over a considerable period of time so we could build a fairly large sample size and break down not only registered voters who were Hispanic, who identified as Hispanic, but also look at them by generation. We asked Hispanics several questions, did we not, about where they were born and their parents, Lydia?
Yep, that's correct. We find out if they were born in the U.S., if their either parent was born in the U.S. or a grandparent, so we know if they're immigrants or first generation or second generation Hispanics.
We also asked what country they were born in or their parents were born in, if not born here, and we're going to get to that analysis somewhat later. Looks like the bulk of people who identify as Hispanics who are not born in this country are from Mexico, but nevertheless we're saving that for some future analysis. Lydia, overall, the bottom line, as you put in your piece that you published recently, is Hispanics remain very strongly oriented towards the Democratic Party and, of course, towards Barack Obama when we ask them who they would vote for if the election were held today.
Right. So to put a couple of numbers with that, we get 60% of Hispanics identifying as Democrats or leaning Democratic. Now that's Hispanics that tell us they're registered to vote, and 27% identifying or leaning Republican. So in line with that, we have a Hispanic leaning toward Obama, 66 to 25 over Romney, more than 2-to-1 favoring Obama, which is very similar to how Hispanics voted in 2008.
And what's interesting about it is we find a difference in that variable of whether or not you were first or second generation or more based on your vote for Obama. Those who are registered voters but are second generation, that is, they were born here, are a little less likely to say they would vote for Obama than those who are just in the country but are already registered voters. So there is a difference there. And I know, Lydia, you looked at the same variable based on what priority Hispanics give to certain issues, and there's a difference there as well, right?
Right. So we asked Hispanics to tell us which one of 6 major national policy issues is most important to them. And perhaps surprisingly, immigration was not the runaway top answer of all Hispanics, but it is clearly more important to Hispanics who are immigrants themselves than those who are first generation. So we can get into those numbers in more detail if you'd like.
But what the interesting implication is, of course, is that Obama and Romney to some degree have been talking about immigration policy in their attempt to reach out to Hispanic voters, yet particularly second-generation Hispanic voters are just as interested, maybe not just as interested as others, but they're clearly as interested in the economy as they are immigration policy. So maybe Obama and Romney should be talking more about the economy and less focused just on immigration issues.
Well, that's a clear takeaway. I mean, among all Hispanics, 20% name immigration as their top concern, and that ties with unemployment and health care among all Hispanics as the number one concern.
Now, by all Hispanics, you mean regardless of whether they're registered to vote?
That's right. So all Hispanics living in the U.S., adult Hispanics. Then when we hone in on Hispanic registered voters, which is about half of the Hispanic population, only 12% mention immigration. So it drops from 20% down to 12. Almost half as many registered voter Hispanics are concerned about immigration as all Hispanics are. And it drops to 5th place. It ties for last among issues, with health care, unemployment, economic growth, and even the gap between the rich and poor being each of those mentioned by more Hispanic registered voters than immigration. So that's, perhaps surprising to people who view Hispanics as single-issue immigration voters. It's just simply not the case.
That's true. For a lot of groups, there are relatively few single-issue voters. But you know, one implication of this, Lydia, just in the long term, a lot of people have said, you know, the Democratic Party has an emerging majority coming because the percent of Hispanics is going to grow in the U.S. in the years and decades to come. That's good news for the Democratic Party. However, these data might suggest that as Hispanics are here longer and longer, they may not be quite as reliable Democratic voters as we may think. So maybe that theory is going to have some readjusting as we go forward.
Right. The first-generation Hispanics start to look much more like all Americans than like Hispanics on many of these issues.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating to follow. Shifting gears briefly here, consumer confidence, minus 26 on our measure. That's the fourth week in a row it's down. It's as bad as it's been since January. I know you've looked at consumer confidence a lot off and on over the years. A lot of implications of this, but one of them is it could hurt Barack Obama.
Right. Well, you and I did an analysis, Frank, a couple of months ago of the relationship between our economic confidence number and President Obama's job approval rating. And if you take the job approval rating as a barometer of his reelection, he needs to be near 50%. What we found is sort of his presidency to date, looking at the relationship between economic confidence and his job approval, economic confidence needs to be like maybe a negative 13. It doesn't have to be positive, doesn't even have to be up to the par level, but it needs to be no more than mildly negative for his approval rating to rise consistently to 50%. And instead of, we're bumping up against that level about a month ago, but it slid back down, and at negative 26, he's some distance away from a comfortable level of consumer confidence for re-election.
Well, and that's a critical point. We'll have to see. We've got the big June and July unemployment numbers coming out, trouble in Europe, a lot of other things happening out there, but this is a real indicator that if it doesn't pick up over the next month or two, it could be a more negative indicator for Obama's re-election chances.
That's right.
That would seem reasonable.
And historically, most presidents have been in their safety zone by now in terms of many of these indicators. He's really kind of pushing the calendar for it to be late June and to not be at 50% approval for economic confidence, to not be a little more positive than it is, for satisfaction not to be higher. The clock's really, really ticking.
Well, we'll wait and see. Changes can come and can come fast in a presidential race, but we'll wait and see what happens. Speaking of changes, next week, I'll be back with Susan Page, and we'll be talking about what almost certainly will be the Supreme Court's ruling on the Affordable Care Act, probably coming out this week, not as we're taping now. We don't have it yet, but when it comes out, we'll talk about the political implications. That is the potential to really, again, throw the race up into some turmoil, depending how Romney and Obama react to this very, very important Supreme Court ruling. Thank you very much, Lydia Saad, for being with us. That's it for this week. This is Election Matters, and I'm Frank Newport, Gallup Editor-in-Chief.